Do you have a close friend, family member, or partner who you suspect might be on the autism spectrum? Odds are that more people in your life have autism than you realize. You can start to observe behaviors that could help this person and help you better understand them. Now, just a note, I'm not a medical professional, but I have worked in education with hundreds of families and children, some of whom were diagnosed with autism based on the observations of me or my staff. And I also have Chris, my partner of almost 20 years. He was recently diagnosed with autism, in addition to his ADHD, at the age of 41, after a lifetime of masking and after lots of observations by me that helped steer his doctors on the path to this diagnosis. I've learned a lot through these experiences about the behaviors and characteristics that could be signs of autism, and I want to share them in order to help with understanding of people with autism from a neurotypical perspective, especially people who may seem to perform well in society but do show signs, often only in private, of the strains and challenges that their autistic brains are putting on themselves. So today I'm going to share 6 signs that your loved one might be on the autism spectrum. Highly sensitive to smells. When I say highly sensitive, think of this as something that is a huge game changer and something that throws off everyday life. Some examples are smells of all kinds. Flowers, perfumes, colognes, body odors, food smells, smoke, but also some smells that you might not even notice, like the faint smell of cleaning supplies days after they were used, or the smell of coins, especially copper coins like pennies. And when I say that this throws off everyday life, does this person need to leave the room or that particular place because of these smells? For example, Chris and I have gotten into a lot of Ubers where the smell was stale, but it didn't really seem that strong to me. But Chris not only needed to stop the car, even though it was already paid for, and get out and get fresh air, but he even would need to wait for another Uber or walk, even though it might make him late. So smells in hospitals and doctors' clinics can also evoke similar strong reactions. And when I say strong reactions, Chris has actually gotten sick and thrown up on more than one occasion from the smell of something. So ask yourself, if your friend or family member or loved one reacts strongly to smells, possibly even to the point of major frustration or illness. You may already know that the autistic brain is highly sensitive to all kinds of sensory stimuli. So in addition to smells, textures and fabrics can also cause all kinds of stress to someone with autism. The tags on clothing, the fabric at the seams of clothing, any loose threads, these can all cause major discomfort and big reactions to someone autistic. The same goes for bedding and pillowcases. So this is something to keep in mind when you travel or when you need to leave the comfort zone of this person. How well does this person adapt? They might avoid leaving home, especially overnight, and for good reason. Another touch sensation that you might not think about regularly is food textures. I've noticed a lot of autistic people have very strong feelings about particular foods and textures. And for kids, many of them might refuse to eat those things or only want to eat those things. So you might observe that this person only eats certain things over and over for very long periods of time. When I say over and over, Chris went through a phase where he ate sweet and sour pork every night for 30 days. I'm not sure I could ever love a food that much to have it for that long, but for him, it wasn't just the taste or the flavor. It's the combination of the textures too. So if he had gone unchecked, he probably would have continued eating it for months and months, and that was perfectly fine to him. So if a place changes their recipe suddenly on a food that Chris really likes, he gets upset about it and he talks about it quite a lot. For neurotypical people, it might get shrugged off as, well, I guess I'll try the other flavors of French toast, since they stopped carrying the one that I like. But for Chris, this was a much bigger loss, to the point where he still talks about that French toast at that particular restaurant months after the restaurant stopped serving it. Other sensory stimuli that might cause big reactions are lights, especially fluorescent ones. This is a tricky one because sometimes the person doesn't even fully realize this is the problem, but it can be a stressor for sure. And I've seen this especially with kids. Flashing lights are also tricky, so in everyday life, this might not be too noticeable, but if you go to a movie theater and the person seems really overwhelmed, this could be the reason. Same with really loud or sudden noises, which is part of why Chris is named movie theaters as one of the places that really suck for autism. Keep in mind that the autistic brain functions way differently, so it picks up on all the sounds, and projects them in ways that Chris describes as being overwhelming to his senses because he's not able to really filter out the ones that are most important. So for example, in a crowd, rather than focusing on the person he's with, he describes all the background noises as also being amplified. So this is why a lot of people on the spectrum love noise-canceling headphones to help them tune out all the noises that just are overloading their brains. And the strong dislike of sudden noises are also connected to another sign: constant body tension and anxiety. Imagine you're running all the time with a giant harness pulling you back while scary images of your least favorite person in the world pulsate before your eyes. This is how I imagine it feels to experience the constant body tension and exhaustion that comes with living in a world that isn't very well designed for your brain. Being asked to socialize when you're super uncomfortable in social situations, or having to navigate sudden changes like road closures or scheduling changes with a doctor's appointment to start the day, needing to eat foods that you don't like, all of these might take a physical toll on people with autism. And then add to that sudden phone calls or the loud dropping sound of something heavy or nearby construction noise. This can all be almost too much to bear. This is because of the differences in executive functions for people with autism. So something like this can not only trigger stress and tension, but also a lot of physical symptoms like sweating, headaches, and chronic exhaustion. The body of the autistic person often goes straight into fight or flight response, even though the person is safe and logically does know this. So at the end of something that seems simple or easy to a neurotypical person, like going to the dentist, a person with autism might need to take the rest of the day off to recover from the stress and the sensory overload of that particular experience. Not to mention the stress of getting to the appointment, like the traffic or the other people they encounter, being worried about getting there on time, the smells of the office, the sounds of the drills. It's a lot to handle when the whole world is amplified 1,000%. Chris seems to have two settings for sleep: virtually no sleep, getting up every couple hours, or just straight up insomnia, or the sleep of exhaustion, where he's basically dead to the world. Really poor sleep is a chronic issue for people with autism, and from what I've read, this often starts young, but it gets more serious with age and with added responsibilities and more encounters in the world. But sleep, which is vital for autistic people to function and to be able to attempt to regulate their emotions and go about a normal day, is really hard to come by most of the time. So if you have a loved one who always struggles with sleep, it could be that their brain struggles to shut down, or maybe the pillows aren't the right combination, or the blankets are too scratchy, or the AC is making too much noise and it isn't cold enough in the room, and all of this could be a sign of autism. Compared to most neurotypical people I know, autistic people are a bit unaware of their hunger or thirst levels, and they might struggle to remember to eat or drink, even if they haven't eaten all day long. Now, I have friends with ADHD who also struggle with this too. So that's part of why it's difficult to attribute one of these symptoms to specifically autism. But in combination, these are some of the most obvious and observable signs, especially with someone you know really well or that you live with. I've also seen that people with autism, and definitely Chris, seem to run hot almost all the time. And Chris has a really hard time getting comfortable when he feels hot, which is almost constantly. So he keeps our home pretty chilly, around 18 to 20 degrees Celsius, or around 64 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit for all of my American friends. But he actually needs this temperature, especially when he tries to sleep. Otherwise, he's just uncomfortable and hot, and you can see it visibly. And this just makes all the other things happening to his autistic brain harder and harder to handle. At first glance, a meltdown can look a lot like a temper tantrum. And Chris actually already did a video breaking down the differences in how temper tantrums and autistic meltdowns differ in both motivation and outcomes. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that. But as an observer, when a meltdown does happen, it's not pretty. And it's also something that leaves Chris feeling completely exhausted, sad, and lonely. A meltdown comes usually because Chris has been pushed to a point of major overload, and he can't control his frustration. He's practiced what to do with this a lot, but especially when he's overly tired from not sleeping more than a couple hours for maybe 3 or 4 weeks in a row, or when this comes at the end of a long line of irritations that have stacked up throughout the day or throughout the week, the meltdowns might come more quickly than usual. And something that usually wouldn't bother him much could could cause a major disappointment. A meltdown might seem to a neurotypical person to be a huge overreaction, and it can be over something that seems relatively minor. But what the neurotypical person doesn't see is all that's happening within the autistic brain. It could be that this event triggered an emotional response because of how it's connected with something else, and in that particular moment, the person with autism might not even be fully aware of what happened either. One thing to know is that you can't always reason with a person or ask them to explain themselves, especially at that particular moment in time, because their brain is just completely full. So pushing them to talk will usually just make the situation much worse, sending the person into a full shutdown. During a shutdown, the person might close themselves off from the world for a period of time and just wants to be alone. They don't want you to console them or to even be nearby most of this particular time. They just want a stimulus-free quiet spot to recover. And meltdowns and shutdowns do take recovery time, and every autistic person has their own method of recovering. But if your buddy has outbursts like this, and it happens often enough that you notice it, this could be because their brain is overloaded and they may be on the autism spectrum. The good news is, this can improve a lot with awareness of triggers, practice, and with also continuing to work together with patience. Remember, if you believe your loved one might be on the spectrum, it's not your job to force them to see a doctor. Support them first by listening and being there for them. You might want to discuss what you've noticed about them, especially executive functioning challenges, and then steer them towards medical help or therapy in order to support them in those ways. Did you find these observable signs of autism helpful for you? Or have you noticed other observable signs for someone especially that's undiagnosed? Share some of your ideas in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video. To like more stuff.